believe that women are less than men in terms of pretty much everything. I don't think we're as smart. I don't think we do as much for society, and I don't think we're as useful or needed. Do you think that's wrong?
Yes.
Why?
Because back in Genesis, God made man and woman, male and female, in his image and likeness. So there's no human being who does not bear the image of Christ. The greatest Christian to ever live was the Mother of God. She's done more miracles. She's had a longer and more glorious career in the church since her repose than any other human being who's ever lived. She's more loved than any other human being who's ever lived. And she is, for us, the fulfillment of womanhood. You mentioned Eve a couple of times. But here's the thing about Eve. Eve, in the same way that Adam is a type, Eve is also a type. So going back to those apostolic fathers we mentioned, what they say is that Mary is the new Eve. So a little typology here. In Genesis, woman is taken out of man's side. So the first Eve is taken out of the side of the first Adam. But in the gospel, the second Adam is taken out of the womb of the second Eve. And in the gospel according to St. John, the first few days of the gospel are laid out in direct parallel to the first week of creation, culminating in this event right here, the wedding at Cana. The wedding at Cana blows away so much of our expectations about how things are supposed to work, not just between men and women, but between everything, between humans and God. At the wedding at Cana, the tradition is, by the way, that the bride and groom there, that the groom is one of Christ's disciples, one of his younger disciples. So Christ goes to the wedding, and his mother is probably helping out in the kitchen, kind of directing things back there. And so at some point she comes to him, and as we have shown in the icon right here, she says, they have no wine. Now, what's really interesting is that in the Middle Ages, for instance, you see this in Dante's Purgatorio. In the Middle Ages, they saw this moment as actually a moment of supreme charity overcoming envy. And they're like, well, what does it have to do with this? Well, because we all know some woman, somebody in our life who, if she was at a party and they ran out of an essential thing, you'd immediately hear, well, if I had been in charge of the party, I would have done a much better job, right?
So she's lying.
But she doesn't do this. She doesn't do this. She comes to Christ and she says, she just sees a need. She sees the shame, the embarrassment they're about to feel. And even though it's a very small social embarrassment in the grand scheme of things, she comes to him and she says, we have no wine. And then he says this very strange thing to her.
Okay.
What he says to her is, in Greek, it's literally, woman, what is this between you and me? Now, there's two important things here, which I'll have to take in turn. First thing is he calls her woman. Well, what day of creation are we on? Well, we're on the sixth day, because this is the sixth day in the chronology of St. John's Gospel. So it's the sixth day after his baptism, which is the remaking of the cosmos, right? The Holy Spirit hovering over the deep. So it's the sixth day. Well, what happens when God takes Eve out of Adam's side? He says he called her woman. And then he named her Eve, woman because she was taken out of man, and then Eve because she was the mother of all things living. Now, hold on, I'm almost there. So he says to her, woman, what is this between you and me? Well, that second part is a quote from the Old Testament. It's the story of the widow at Zarephath. Short version of the story, there's this widow living in Tyre and Sidon, and the prophet Elijah comes to stay with her for a while, and one day her son dies. And she comes to him and she says, what is this between us, man of God? Like, in other words, what have I done to tick you off? Like, why is my son dead? So he goes and he stretches himself out over the son and he breathes into him 3 times and brings him back to life. So what could that 3 times possibly be referring to? But in any case, stretches himself out, by the way, in the shape of a cross over him. So Christ is quoting this story to his mother. What is she saying? What is he saying? He's saying, if you ask me to do this now, you are going to set in motion a chain of events which will result in the death of your only son. So is this really what you want? And she just turns to the servants and she says, do whatever he tells you. She is once again giving her yes, as she gave her yes for him to be made flesh. Now she gives her yes for him to begin the ministry, which is going to result in the greatest sorrow of her life. 3 years later, standing at the foot of the cross, he looks down and he says to the John, the beloved disciple, who we show right here on this side of the icon of the crucifixion, he says to her, he says, son, behold your mother, mother, behold your son. So, in Genesis, Eve is named woman, and then she's named mother. And in the Gospel according to St. John, the Mother of God is named woman, so she's the new type of womanhood, and then mother as the fulfillment of that type.
Well, but why is it wrong to believe that men are above us and more competent? Like if I look at society and I look at men and women, it just seems like women are doing the wrong thing, aborted an eighth of the world population. That's crazy. Like you've heard that a third of Gen Z has been aborted. And it seems like whenever women get power, we just do the wrong thing, where when men get power, they seem to do the right thing. And
50-50.
No, I would say it's not 50-50 at all. I think think about how crazy it is.
It's quite possible you and I would disagree on what the right thing is as well. But
I'll give you an example. Think about how crazy it is that 1 out of 3 women you've met has had an abortion. It means 1 out of 3 women commit murder. So I don't think it's wrong to say that men are above us in terms of their morality, in terms of their intelligence. Like women don't invent anything. We don't really do much things that are useful. And it seems like the way the world, and I'm not that religious, I just go based off of what I see, but it seems like the world works when women listen to men, and that men build the world, and that the only way it works is that when women listen to the men, because I believe they're superior to us.
So you have a good case of what a friend of mine would call Plato brain.
Okay.
Do you know much about? Okay. So is this idea that something, let's say, higher up the ladder is better than something lower down the ladder? So you've confused position with worth.
Well,
so
like higher in intelligence, higher in morality, right?
What does intelligence matter?
Well, we could say morality if you want to make it a spiritual thing.
Morality is so downstream from spirituality.
Really?
Yeah, so much so. It's sort of like the least thing.
Morality is the least thing of spirituality?
Yeah, that's the children's spirituality.
Okay. I mean, okay, let's just
what we're talking about here is being invited into the very life of God.
Right. I just imagine you'd have to live in a moral way to get that.
That is part of it, but that's what I'm saying. That's the bottom rung of the ladder.
Okay.
So, the question is, when we're talking about the value of something in Orthodox terms, to what degree does it participate in the life of God? Right? That's what all this context is about. Well, what I'm telling you is that a woman has participated in the life of God at a greater degree than any other human being who's ever lived. And that is the dogmatic teaching of the Orthodox Church. There's absolutely no wiggle room on that.
Right. I'm not discounting Mary, but I'm just saying women in general today. Men.
I don't do that word in general.
Well, to me, a lot of times it seems like that's kind of just a way to evade a question.
I get what you're saying. I'm really sorry, but it's just true. It's just true. You're asking, are women worth less than men? The answer is categorically, according to any Christian doctrine, the answer is categorically no.
It doesn't necessarily mean that, I think that women are above children, but it doesn't mean it doesn't mean the children are worthless, but the children have to listen to the women. I think women, and because the mothers are more competent, at least when they're young. I think men are more competent than women. It's not to say that women are evil sort of, but it's not to say that, it's just to say that men are superior to us in terms of intelligence and in terms of morality. It seems like the way the world works, that God comes through the men, and the only way that women act in a moral way is if the men pass that on to the women. That seems to be...
There was that time when God came through a woman, though.
And maybe you could say Mary, right? So there's once, but just in general, most women I meet, the only way they're moral is if they have a strong husband or a strong father. Other than that, it seems to be abortion.
What you really said, though, was the only way that people are healthy is when they're in a healthy family. I would, of course, agree with that.
Yes, but that would still put women below men. And I'm just curious, some churches agree with that, some don't.
So again, what do you mean by below?
Below men in terms of morality, intelligence.
If you were asking me, do I think women are more sinful than men?
Yeah. More sinful.
I have no way of measuring that.
Really? I have eyes. Women are naked in the street. You got to think about, a third of Gen Z has been aborted. I don't think a third of men would commit murder. I don't.
Well,
and like, even if you look at queens and kings, right? Like, queens are more likely to go into war than kings. So it just seems like whenever women get into power, we're incredibly violent. And men, white men in particular, are incredibly kind and considerate. And they tend to do the right thing. And I've just noticed this.
How does this make you feel about what you're doing?
It makes me feel great, because I think there's not enough people talking about it. So it makes me feel awesome.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And like, I don't think, if a kid, I don't think if
So you're talking about if you asked me, do you believe that the world is hierarchical?
Yeah.
I believe that way more than you do.
Okay.
100%. Of course. There's lots of different hierarchies. They overlap. The family is one of those.
Correct.
And this normal, healthy family hierarchy is husband, wife, children. Of course. Does that mean that they're worth less in the eyes of God? Does that mean that they're less capable of sanctity? They're less capable of becoming a saint? Again, answer is no. So really, you're asking me two different questions there.
I'm just going off what I see in the world, right? Okay. And it just seems like men are more moral than women, naturally. It's just what it seems like to me.
What's the value of natural morality if you don't know God?
It seems like even the men I know that don't know God still behave in a moral way, where the women just seem to...
It's very nice. Historically, it's not always been the case.
It's right, but the issue I have with... Because, I've just interviewed a lot of people that have really gone in depth into history, and I think the best way you can come to conclusions without being manipulated is look in the now. Not to say that history is not important, but again, being that I've interviewed people like yourself that I'm sure have done a ton of research into history, you guys all have very different conclusions. So just as a normal person, I have to go off of what I see now, Okay. And I think that's how most people come to their conclusions. Like, if you hear something and it matches what you see in the world, that's how you form an opinion. I have a friend that became a vegan. It was because he started eating vegan, and I wouldn't do that, right? But now he's a vegan guy.
Okay.
Okay, you're not following? You think? It's okay, you can say what you think. I'm gonna just I have a few more questions and I just don't want to forget, but go ahead.
I want to nitpick, but I'm not going to nitpick.
You can nitpick, it's okay.
I'm
not easily offended. You can nitpick, it's fine.
Let's just say that is the world hierarchical? Yes. I believe that so strongly. I voluntarily put myself into a hierarchy, right? And making my life much more complicated than it should be, because not only am I the head of my home, but the bishop is the head of my church, and Christ is the head of his church, and so on, right? So yeah, there's a hierarchy. It goes all the way up and it goes all the way down.
Okay, so I think we agree. I think that the place where I would disagree with what you're saying is that something has changed with the entry of Jesus Christ into the human experience. Okay. And the thing that has changed is sanctity, which used to belong to something like a privileged few, the door has now been opened to every single human being. You have that opportunity. I have that opportunity. And we don't experience that sanctity simply by
pursuing a moral life, which is why, to me, it's not that morality is not important. It's not that I don't believe abortion is murder, because I certainly believe that. But when you tell me somebody's a murderer, what I want to do is go
Throw him in jail. Sorry.
and heal that person.
Yeah.
So, one of our greatest saints, Saint Mary of Egypt, up here in the upper right-hand corner. We read her life every Lent. Read it together here in the church. She lived an incredibly profligate life. So much so that sometimes when I'm reading that story in church, I'm like a little, these are weird terms to be using in church. She lived this incredibly profligate life. And then one day she wanted to enter the church in Jerusalem in order to see a piece of the Holy Cross of the Lord, which had been brought there. And as she approaches the doors of the temple, the Mother of God turns her away and won't let her enter. She tries to enter 3 times. She can't enter. Finally, she goes in front of the Mother of God. And she prays this amazing prayer of repentance, and then she goes out into the desert, and she never comes back. The only reason we know about her is because one day, eventually.
Oh, so
but
she
the only
just
reason
lived
we
by
know
herself?
about her, she lived out in the desert by herself
And
for
she survived?
decades. The way that we know about her
Cannot imagine a woman just
is that there
surviving in
was
the desert.
there was a monk.
Yeah.
There was a monk.
Oh, she found a monk to help her.
Who?
I knew. Okay, sorry. Go ahead.
There's this monk named Zosimus. And Zosimus, the abbot, was the abbot of his own monastery, super holy dude, doing all the things, fasting like you wouldn't believe, staying up all night, praying, never sleeping. And so he just sort of says one day to God, I think I found it the summit of perfection, and I'm a little discouraged about this, because I just can't see anybody getting holier than me. So God says, I want you to go to this one monastery in Palestine. So Zosimus goes there. Turns out everybody at the monastery is like more hardcore than he is. He's like, okay, I get it. But his lesson's not done. Because what they would do at this monastery, and this is kind of the origin of Lent, what they do at this monastery is at the beginning of Lent, so the 40-day plus some period before Pascha, Easter, the monks would each take a single loaf of bread, and they would prostrate in front of each other, ask each other's forgiveness, and then they would go in separate directions. And some of them would make it back alive for Easter, and others would die in the desert. This is what they did every year.
The woman made it? Oh my God.
So he goes and he crosses the Jordan, and he goes out into the desert. And they're out there in the desert, he suddenly sees what at first he assumes is like a spirit or a wraith or something like this. But it's this emaciated woman who's been living in the desert for decades on essentially nothing. And he meets her, and she quotes the scriptures to him even though she's never read or heard them, because Christ himself has taught her the words of life. She floats in the air, she walks across water, she does all these things. And he realizes this is actually who I was sent to meet. And the thing we'd say about her is the reason that she's a saint, and the reason that we read her life at that moment in the annual life of the church is not because she was a paradigmatically moral person. Somebody goes out there and they find morality, that's great for them. I appreciate it if somebody was to share the world with you. I'm not interested in it. What I'm interested in is what Mary did in the desert, which was to find true repentance.
So if a man has a wife or a woman that he's interested in church and she lies about her past, is that a case for an annulment?
How did you get there from the story that I was just telling?
No, it's just my next question.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. To finish the story, the reason that we put her life in that place where we put it is because she is for us the paradigmatic example of what it means to be a Christian, which is not to be a super good person, but is to live a life of repentance. And I think that women are just as capable of that as men.
Sorry, that was why, because I was thinking if he found a girl like that had lived a crazy life and she lied about it, is that the case for an annulment?
I don't know.
Oh, okay. No cut and dry answer?
I just don't know.
Okay.
I'm not a canon lawyer. I've never had to process an annulment, so I couldn't tell you.
Okay.